Should you sell your current GPU and buy one of the new NVIDIA RTX 50 series GPUs? The answer is going to be yes and no. In some cases, you may want to upgrade. Now, let's start with the people that should likely upgrade. First, NVIDIA's pricing is not terrible this generation. I mean, look, a 5070 for $549. It's not $499 like past 70 series GPUs were. At least it's better than like the 4070 Super at $599. So it's okay. Now, I would say even the 30 series GPU owners and older, it might make a lot of sense to actually upgrade to RTX 50 series. You're going to be getting a pretty significant performance bump, not to mention all of the AI improvements that NVIDIA has had during the last several years. Namely, like with the RTX 4000, you got frame generation with DLSS. And like it or not, DLSS and AI is here to stay in terms of generating more frames, especially with the new multi-frame generation that are coming out with the RTX 50 series GPUs. So if the games you play actually utilize those type of technologies, you're going to see a pretty nice bump. And they have newer generation RT cores for ray tracing, newer generation tensor cores. So everything in general is going to be better. And I think it's a pretty sizable jump from even like a 3080 or 3090 that a lot of people still have to the RTX 50 series, even to like a 5070 or, preferably something with more VRAM like a 5070 Ti.
And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video.
So 30 series and older, that means 20 series, anything. I think probably you could look at an upgrade, especially if the pricing isn't too bad. Now, the big question here, if you own a 40 series, should you upgrade? Yes and no. I would say yes if you have like maybe a mid to lower tier 40 series GPU. For example, if you have a 4060, you may be interested in a 5070 if you can, budget for that difference, because then you're going to get a sizable performance gain and all of the other improvements that come with the new generation. Now, if you have, let's say, a 4070, is a 5070 worth it? It might eventually be like 20 to 30% faster. The same amount of VRAM, 12 gigabytes of VRAM. So there, you're kind of on the fence. But if you can get a 5070 for $549 and maybe sell your 4070 for a fair price on the secondhand market, you're looking at maybe like a smaller upgrade. And I do think RTX 50 series seems to have some nice improvements, with ray tracing, with DLSS 4, which you will be able to use on other GPUs. But in some cases, it's obviously going to be better on the new stuff that has better, tensor cores, better RT cores for ray tracing. So I think 4070 is kind of like the cutoff point. If you have like a 4080 or 4090 or 4080 Super, it gets a little more interesting because yes, obviously a 5080 is going to be a lot faster than a 4080, but it's kind of diminishing returns at that point. You're still dealing with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, even though the new stuff has that GDR7. So I would say I would upgrade if you're stepping up to a GPU tier. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a 4070 Ti, a 5080 might actually be a decent upgrade, especially if you didn't have the super variety. If you only had 12 gigabytes of VRAM, you're going to get 12 gigabytes of the faster VRAM with the 5080 Super, multi-frame generation with the DLSS 4. You're going to get some really nice improvements in that GPU. And while it is more expensive than a 4070 Ti, at least NVIDIA kept it under $1,000. So it's a little more reasonable. It's not, an impossible stretch for most people. Now, if you want the 5090, that's one that you don't even need my opinion. If you have the budget for it and you want it, I can't see any reason not to recommend that one for people that can buy it, because it's the best GPU. I want to get one. It looks incredible. 32 gigabytes of VRAM, which I'm never going to use that much VRAM, but the performance, and we don't know the numbers yet until the reviews come out. I'm only going off by what NVIDIA shared, which is a lot of DLSS, by the way, a lot of AI. So you can't really get a full grasp of the actual performance of the GPU, but at least from the numbers that we've seen with 575 watts, which is pretty crazy, you can bet that's going to be a monster GPU. And $1999, while expensive, seems fair for what it is, especially considering that that's really the only GPU in that class that's going to be that fast. Now, it's funny because somebody has a 4090, you would normally tell them, you can keep your 4090. It's not that big of a difference in most cases that you'll notice. But it ends up being that a lot of people who have 4090s are the ones that want to upgrade because they're the ones usually on the bleeding edge. They want the fastest and the latest. I can't blame that. I'm kind of like that myself. So I completely understand it. Wanting just the fastest thing, even if it was 5% faster, you just want the fastest thing because it's the hobby. It's what you do. It's enjoyable. I completely understand it. For those people, go ahead. The 5090 looks pretty insane. Obviously, if you can stomach the price, very insane GPU. More reasonable, obviously, is the 5080. I think that's going to be the real high-end GPU for most people because it comes in under 1,000. It's not double the price like the 5090. And it represents likely a pretty good upgrade for most people. We're going to have to see the reviews to see where these come in without DLSS and without AI. Their traditional rasterization performance will likely still be a pretty good uptick from last generation, just nothing crazy like, 5070 is not going to be the 4090 in raster performance unless you turn on DLSS with multi-frame generation, for example. That's the only time you're going to see those frame rate differences when you're using AI on the new stuff versus like a 4090. But overall, I think it's looking to be a pretty impressive generation. Pricing at least seems fair. I mean, NVIDIA dropped the price on the 5070, $50 from the 4070 Super. They dropped it as well for the 5070 Ti, $50 compared to the 4070 Ti Super. The 5080, they kept the same at $999. Obviously, the 5090 went up, but it might be justifiable just because of the different upgrades that it has. 32 gigabytes of VRAM, an insane amount of CUDA cores. It's just really, really a high performance GPU. So I'm excited to see how that one pans out. I'm thinking it's going to be probably much, much better than anything else that's, been before it by a pretty wide margin. So that's what I think, to summarize, people should upgrade. If you have a 30 series or older, if the games you're playing are fine, obviously, if you don't really care about it, that doesn't matter. But if you want to see some of the best ray tracing graphics, if you want to play on higher resolutions, I think a jump from 30 series to the 50 series might be pretty reasonable for those people. And obviously, anybody with older GPUs, it goes without saying. The 40 series owners from the 4070 and below, the 4070 is kind of like the cutoff point where, obviously you still have frame generation, you still have the performance of a newer level of GPUs, but 4070 and below, you may want to consider upgrading to something like a 5070, for example. I think it's going to be a nice performance difference, might be worth it for that 549. Anything above a 4070, including 4080s, 4080 Super, 4090, you really will have to think if the games you're playing will benefit from that type of uplift. Because then obviously you're going to lose more depreciation on your 40 series GPUs as prices are going down now. And you're going to have to pony up the difference for whatever GPU that you want from 50 series. So we'll see what happens. Overall, I think this might be a good generation. I don't think that many people really liked the 40 series 100%. Aside from the 4090, there were a lot of complaints about the 4060, 4060 Ti, especially with the prices. I know I complained about the 4070 Ti a lot because of the paltry 12 gigabytes of VRAM. But now NVIDIA fixed some of those problems, giving us a 5070 Ti with at least 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So we're on maybe a little bit better path now than before. Interesting to see how this generation pans out. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you guys on the next video.